Hello and welcome to episode 41 of The Thing About Golf, the podcast series from Golf Australia magazine that explores the eternal mystery of why people get so hooked on this, frankly, absurd game. My name's Rod Murray, and on this episode, my colleague John Huggan brings us a fascinating discussion with two-time US Open winner Curtis Strange, a player who, honestly, I probably didn't know enough about prior to this interview, but came away with a changed opinion. John Huggan joins me now to set up their talk, and Huggy, I suspect I'm probably like many outside the US in not really knowing much about Strange, apart from his two US Opens that he'd bob up on commentary occasionally. Of course, that unfortunate interview he did with Tiger all those years ago, the You'll Learn, which I note you definitely avoided chatting with him about, which is fair enough. He's much more thoughtful than I expected. How do you know Curtis Strange so well? The two of you clearly have quite a good rapport.
I've known Curtis a long time now. From my time at Golf Digest in the States. It's a long time ago now. I left 25 years ago, but I'm much more familiar with guys of that generation than I am with the modern American players, certainly. Even now, I can call up the likes of Mark O'Meara and Curtis and those guys and get them to tell me things. So, and Curtis is a good guy. I'm not sure that he and I have much in common politically, but certainly when it comes to golf, he and I are pretty much on the same wavelength.
Yeah, although you do have a couple of good fun little sort of disagreements, which I think is fantastic. It's what the game needs, a bit more debate. You and I are very guilty, I think, of being in the bubble where we talk to people who agree with us all the time. We need to get out more and get some of that disagreement, and he gives us a bit, which is fantastic. For our Australian listeners in particular, Huggy, I guess I remember Curtis Strange playing here quite a bit, but I never really make the connection that he did. He talks very fondly of his time in Australia, which I thought was not all American golfers who've come here for the money get it. I felt like he did get it.
Yeah, well, he won 3 times in Australia, which I hadn't appreciated until I did a little bit of research on him before we talked. And I'm not surprised that he did well. He had the kind of game that, Curtis was just a really, really good player. He won pretty much everywhere, although I do give him some grief over his absenteeism from the Open Championship. He most notably in 1985 he skipped the Open at Royal St George's and then played in the Dutch Open the following week. Ooh. Because he was being paid to do so. I've routinely given him grief for that over the years, and he didn't play in 84 or 87 either. I think he says in the interview that how much he regrets all that. That was when he was at his peak years, and goodness knows he could have won the Open. But he did. He certainly rectified that. He shot a 62 at St Andrews in the Dunhill Cup, was the course record at the time, against Greg Norman, no less, at that day. Why he decided he wasn't going to come and play in the Open when he was at the very peak of his game is a mystery that only he can solve, I think. But he was a terrific player, and I've always liked him. And the reason one of the reasons he and I get on is way back in the day, early on when I first met him, he said, "Oh yeah," he says, I know you. He says, I like the way you write. You've got some vinegar in you. I like that because I've got vinegar in me too.
Which is very true. It probably explains some of that impetuousness of youth, of turning his back on the Open. He's a very fiery character, Huggy, and I could imagine him as a youngster saying, the Open, I don't need it. It needs more than I need it. I could see him doing that and then growing up and looking back and thinking to himself, what a prat you were. He seems to have that capacity, which I think is maybe what I found endearing. I was surprised that not all Americans get it when it comes to giving a bit of stick and needle. He seems to be one who does, which probably explains in part why the two of you get along.
Yeah, you're right. Most Americans, they don't get the concept of which is common here and where I come from, and certainly where you come from, is that the more affection you have for your mates, the more abuse you tend to give them.
Yes.
That is extremely foreign to most Americans, but Curtis is not your typical American in that respect.
No, indeed. Well, he's been a great contributor to the game. He certainly spoke wonderfully, I thought, about the Ryder Cup and his experience as captain. Of course, we forget he was captain the year of 9/11 when the Ryder Cup got delayed. So his captaincy was a sort of a 3-year ongoing thing, and through all that there was some really interesting stuff about that in his times here in Australia. And he talked, I thought, very sensibly about, well, not so sensibly about the US Open and how it should be set up, but very sensibly about links golf and why he, like many, I think, came to love it as opposed to loving it at first.
Yeah, well, I mean, he does. He's always. I suppose it's not surprising, is it, that he's a fan of the old style US Opens, if we can put it that way, where it was all about fairways and greens, narrow fairways, thick rough. I mean, that he thrived in that environment. I mean, as is obvious from his record. So that he's a fan of that is no great surprise. But I think he's probably guilty of thinking of what was best for him rather than what was best for the game at that point. And I did get into him a little bit about that, but he and I have talked about that a million times, and he's never going to change his opinion.
Well, Huggy, I really enjoyed this chat. I think our listeners will as well. It was fantastic to hear Curtis's thoughts on a whole range of issues, and it's been great of you to join us today. So thanks for that, and let's let people get on with the interview.
My pleasure. Curtis Strange, welcome to the Thing About Golf podcast. I always start with the same question on these things. What's the thing about golf for you?
Oh, it's a pretty broad question. I think it's, kind of the joy and the excitement and the thrill, all the above that you can have your entire life with it. We all started off very young in the game, and I did, and I fell in love with it. And just because I don't play anymore, or when I don't play very well, it doesn't mean I can't still enjoy it as much as I ever did. I still think about it. I still, think about swings and putts, and some of these young kids make me think that how they've reinvented some parts of the game. But it's a game for a lifetime, but that's a bit of an understatement. You can play it and enjoy it for your entire life.
I think I'm right in saying you got into it through your father. Your father was a very good player in his own right, but sadly died when you were quite young. Talk to me a little bit about that, and what age did you get to? Could you beat your father? I mean, that's maybe the first question. And obviously, you had some built-in competition and a twin brother as well. But talk me through that a little bit.
Well, I was lucky enough. It's all about access, and in any sport or any endeavor. And my dad was a club professional, PGA club professional, and so I had access to golf at an early age. And it doesn't mean I had to fall in love with it like I did. My brother, I have a twin brother, identical twin brother, and he played baseball and football. So he went the other, still played a lot of golf and became very good. But I just started going to the golf course when I was 9 years old and hanging out all day long and during the summers and just enjoyed every part of it. The business part of it, the practice, the play-in, working the golf shop, emptying the Coca-Cola machine every night. I mean, just all the little things I enjoyed, and it never stopped. And he died when I was 14 years old, so I never got the chance to beat him because he was quite a good player. Mm-hmm. And but I'm sure the time would eventually have come, just as it did with my boy and me. So I was very, very lucky to have that access, and which a lot of people don't. I mean, it's the way of the world. And that's the kind of the big topic now, getting more people into the game and getting more of this, more of that. Well, it is about golf and tennis are elitist type of sports, and more so in the U.S. than overseas, I think. And so, there comes, membership at a club, or, certainly the municipal clubs are not as abundant as they used to be. And that's just strictly financial. But, the first tee organizations and all these inner city clinics and golf projects are wonderful. I mean, they're truly wonderful because we want to give access to everybody in the world, but it just doesn't quite work out like that, because where's the follow-up? Where can they go play?
Yeah, I always think that a lot of these things they're noble, as you just said, but they're slightly unrealistic. I mean, there's only so many golf courses and so much access and so many golf courses close to big population centres. It's kind of unrealistic, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, and quite honestly, the one reason the access isn't probably as much as it used to be years ago is the caddy programs over here. They don't exist anymore. Very few elite clubs is where they exist. And what happens when you eliminate the caddy program and go for the electric cart is you don't have access to a lot of these young kids who wouldn't ordinarily ever see the golf course. And I don't care what race, color, creed, anything you are. That's how a lot of people got into the game years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How soon was it clear to you that there was some talent there and that this was something that you could be good at? Because sometimes it takes a little while, but I get the feeling it was quite quick with you.
You know what? Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think so many times we golfers question our talent every day. We are the most insecure lot of any athletes, I think. Why do we always messing with our swings or our putting stances, or every night we lay in bed and said, no good playing son of a bitch, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, John. It's a progression. You went through the same thing. You play junior golf. You play with your kids at the club. You beat some of them, and you go on to playing with some of the older memberships, and you eventually beat some of them. And then you go on to state tournaments. And you beat some of them. It's just all part of progression. And I don't think you ever really sit down and say, I'm pretty damn good at this. I don't think you ever say that in your life. But really? Then you go to college.
Even when you're number one in the world? Come on.
Well, I don't think you ever sit down and say it to yourself. I mean, quietly once in a while, you might say, yeah, that was a pretty good shot over there on 18 on Sunday afternoon. But I was never like that. You keep progressing and you keep moving forward, because you hit enough bad shots out there every day to always keep, a reality check set in at some point in time. Now, then you go into the tour and you start playing well. But I think golf always treats you like, don't ever think you got it. Don't ever say publicly. Don't ever say anything publicly that might be stated as, cocky or arrogant.
Yeah. Is that why you had a slightly pissed off air about you most of the time on the tour?
No.
Is that slightly unfair?
That was just me. I just. It's interesting. We all have these outward appearances, and I stopped making excuses for myself a long time ago, because I like to compete, and everybody likes to beat somebody, and it's just the way I am. I like to think I have another personality with a beer in front of me, but it's just the way it is. And I always felt like I didn't have quite the. I look at some other players; it looked like they were, God's gift to golf swing. And I felt like I had to work at it hard. And so therefore you keep working at it and keep grinding at it and keep, and because of that work ethic, you become better than that other guy that was, gifted and less motivated.
Yeah. Plus the public perception is not always the reality. The two examples I always think of are Ben Crenshaw and Ernie Els, both of whom have got, this gentle Ben and the Big Easy nicknames, and they're both got vile tempers, terrible tempers on the golf course. So, you can never really tell.
Well, this golf will do it. This golf game will do it till you want it. It'll make the nicest people look like villains out there.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm doing starting off with a bit of This Is Your Life stuff. I mean, I know you went to Wake Forest and played in the Walker Cup before you turned pro. Talk to me a little bit about those things, those experiences.
That's part of this progression is, you finish high school and you play a lot of state golf, and you get a scholarship to a great golf school like Wake Forest. And so now there's even more pressure, because you got to live up to that. And you go there. But the best part about college golf is that you're around 3 or 4 really, really, really top-notch players every day. And you compete and you learn from each other. And that's the part of this swing guru stuff that I don't get sometimes, is that we learn from each other, either watching or discussing over dinner or playing a practice round and asking, a guy a question on, how did you hit that shot? How did you hit that? I never got to be around Sevy that often. I played a lot against him, but never played a practice round or talked golf with him much. But, your guys, Sevy, how did you hit that shot or that bunker shot? You learn from these guys. And so, then you move on, and, going to the Walker Cup in 75 at St. Andrews was one of the great thrills for all of us. We didn't know quite what we were getting into, and everybody who's ever played the old course knows exactly what I mean. Here we are, but there's 10 of us, I believe it was 10 on the Walker Cup, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so, and 8 of us were below the age of 22, I think, 7 of us. And so we were kind of cocky and, we thought we might win. And then we go to this place that looks like unlike anything we've ever played in our life. But there you learn all of a sudden, in a matter of 5 or 6 days, you learn to have these shots and the way this golf was played and the way that golf was played. And we came out of there much better players.
Plus, there was a bit of pressure on you in 75, to be honest. I've just finished writing a story on the 71 Walker Cup, which was also at St Andrews, which is the one that GB and I won. The only one that GB and I won between 1938 and 1989.
Stop.
Come on.
Stop. 75 was never an issue.
Well, it was a pretty good team. I'm looking at it here. It's there's some pretty good names in it.
Yeah, we had some good young talent and some old talent. Vinnie Giles and Bill Campbell was the old guy on that team, and we had. I remember. Gosh, I can't remember the players I played now, but they were wonderful players. One I still used to see at the Open Championship a year, the big blonde hair, curly haired gentleman. But anyway, you make friendships that last a lifetime or something like that. And we were fortunate enough to win that time, but it was good stuff.
How did you figure out St Andrews then? I mean, I've talked to as I said, I've just done this story, so I talked to a bunch of the Lanny Wadkins, Tom Kite, Steve Melnick, Vinnie Giles, and Vinnie admitted that he never figured out the golf course in 71. It was just beyond him. It took 2 or 3 more visits for him to actually know what the hell was going on.
I'm not going to say I ever figured it out. I think that going over there, I went back the very next year to play in the British Amateur simply because it was at St Andrews. I don't think I ever really figured it out until playing numerous tournaments over there, and then one year in the Dunhill Cup, that old team event that we used to play, which moved into the tour event now. But I went there, and I don't know, 5 rounds, never hit it in a fairway bunker, and I felt like I finally figured out the proper way to play. You didn't do it all the time because obviously you miss shots and elements, but the proper way to play the golf course. And it's determined on how well you actually are playing and where the wind's coming from. But left, and, there's a reason why every hole location in the Open Championship every day is as far left as they can get it.
Yeah.
Because the safety net is off the tee is left, and then you can't get to that hole location. So, I mean, it's interesting the way they set up the golf course during the Open versus other tournaments, but it was my deal was, it depends on how well you're playing, and then you take the route that you feel like you can play. Left off the tee sets up the tougher second shot, but that's the way I like to do it. It's an interesting golf course. You couldn't recreate it. The one thing, John, I never was able to do that I would have loved to do is play it backwards.
I've done that. Yeah, it's great fun. Yeah, and
it really looks like it.
And some of the bunkers start to make sense when you play it backwards.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The bunkers, when you play it normally, and you say, "What the hell is that bunker over that green for?"
Yeah.
Was for the entrance on the other way.
Yeah.
It really does. It would be pretty cool to do that.
Yeah, I think they actually played a British Amateur there back in the sort of late 19th century that way around. So it has been used.
That would be, they could do that now. They could do that now. I mean, to me, it would be just the same type of golf course.
I tell you what's the second shot to the 17th green, which is the first hole, first tee to 17th green. I tell you what, you better hit it near the fence to be hitting straight down the green, because it's impossible otherwise.
Oh, I know. Well, it's impossible the other way too. So what difference does it make?
Yeah. Anyway, talk to me a little bit more about the Walker Cup. I mean, was there a shot when you were playing the course there that sticks in your mind, or one that in practice that you thought, what the hell, how the hell do I play this? I mean, does your memory stretch back that far? I know it's a long time ago.
Oh yeah. I think the second into 18, we were all kind of wondering what type of shot we should play. We all decided low, bump and run it through the Valley of Sin there. But, there was a number of shots. I think that was the shot that type of shot was what we all were learned a great deal about that week was, the low shot into to 12. We all felt like we could drive the green almost, except for the bunker that sits right in front of the green, 20 yards. As long as we escaped that, and then we had that little bump and roll up, and then maybe on the par 5 14, the bump and roll over the green. Those type of shots is what we weren't used to playing at all, and in fact never did. So we had to learn, and because you have the ability to play the game, you learn very quickly. But it's all about trusting yourself and believing yourself that you can do it too.
Well, before we move on from St Andrews, I did want to go past it without bringing up your 62 in the Dunhill Cup that you mentioned a minute ago. Clearly, you'd figured it out. Although I must admit, I'm going to slightly put an asterisk next to it. The course is a bit easier in October when it's a bit softer than it is in July, generally speaking. Is that fair?
Stop. You know what? That's when I hear you people say that. You people, any naysayer on any record of some significance say that. You know what it was? It was a 62, and I'm standing by my score. But it was kind of fun. It was wonderful. It no longer stands now, so I can say that it's not part of history now. But I played it in a match that really didn't mean a whole lot. Be quite honest. When I look at records of good rounds, John, my immediate thought goes to what the situation it was in. Was it Saturday or Sunday of a tournament when it meant something?
Yeah.
Playing out there with the guys, early Saturday morning at St Andrews, shoot 62. It's not quite the same thing. So it was fun. I never forget. I made about an 8 or 10 footer for par at 17. And then I made about a 15 or 18 footer for birdie at 18. So that was thrilling. It really was, knowing full well what the record was.
Yeah.
But and then I was disappointed. The gentleman in charge some years later didn't acknowledge the fact that it was a record because they put in a couple new tees. With Jesus, they put in tees forever on that place. So,
some of them are not even on the golf course. Let's be honest.
Well, exactly. How can you say it's part of the golf course when 17 is not even on the property?
Yeah, I managed to piss off Peter Dawson, the RNA chief at the time, when I wrote one year just before they put all these new tees in for an Open. I said, this will be the first Open ever to be played on 5 different golf courses at the same time.
That's right.
Which was true.
But it was fun. It was, it was fun to have it for a while. And I got home and a couple of months later, Sarah gave me in a sterling silver scorecard, the record, just as it was on the paper. And it was pretty exciting, and it's still on my wall. So it means more to me than I might lead on to. Yeah. Trust me on that one.
Yeah. Anyway, and to return to the theme we touched on earlier, I mean, at what point during your when you went to college, do you think I'm turning pro at some point, or when did that decision get made that you thought, well, I'm good enough to do this?
John, that was the decision. Once again, the progression. I played very well in college for 3 years, and quite frankly, we didn't have enough. Mom and the family didn't have money because Dad had passed years before to play amateur golf the next year. So I took out a loan myself, a personal loan, to be able to play golf for another 3 or 4 months, and then to bank me for my first 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months on tour. So I turned pro, $10,000 in debt.
I was going to ask you how much it was for, but you've just told me. Yeah.
No, it was $10,000, not a lot, but a 21-year-old can go a long ways on $500. Mm-hmm. So it was something that I felt like I had to do, and I did. And obviously it turned out okay, but I always felt like I abandoned my school and my teammates. But Jay Haas and another good friend of mine on the team were all leaving. They were a year older than I was, so I felt like it was time to move on, and so I did. And it was the biggest decision that I'd ever gone through. It was unbelievable, the anxiety of leaving a comfort zone of your university and and basically it's family too. Yeah. You're leaving, and now you're really on your own. And shortly after that, Sarah and I got married. So not only was I on my own, I was responsible for another person. Mm-hmm. And it was my gosh, it was difficult. It was a lot of pressure, but hey, you grow from that and you learn from that as well.
Do you think that there's not enough of that these days? I mean, it seems like there's cosseted might be too strong a word, but guys turn pro with money already in the bank. There's contracts in place and there's more money to play for. It's a very different world now than the one that you joined. Good and bad sides of that.
It's all good, I guess. The money really doesn't shape the person too much. I still always will believe if you come up the hard way and you struggle a little bit, both with a game or finances, it makes you a little tougher maybe. What does that mean? I don't know. It makes you appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah.
It makes you work maybe a little bit harder because you have nothing to fall back on. That's the old school in me talking, but I see that in young kids a little bit, and the ones that are born with silver spoons in their mouth, and it's just a different way of being, and exactly, and the listeners know exactly what I'm talking about. So struggling was not a bad thing looking back on it for me.
Mm-hmm. At what point did money stop being an issue? That's a good question.
I think it's always an issue.
Yeah.
I think we all worry about the day we go broke and we become a burden on our kids. But it's a valid question. We got our share, and I asked all the time, do you wish you'd have been, playing today? No. I like where I played. I got to compete against Jack and a little bit of Arnie and that generation, and Johnny and Weiskopf and all those guys. And I got to compete against, Tiger and his generation a little bit. So I liked where I was. We got our share of the money, and I don't know. I just, after you win a major championship, winning my first U.S. Open didn't change me too much, John, because I was already successful. Mm-hmm. But somewhere in that time, it became more about playing and, just about, I don't know. You always thinking about it, but it's not as big an issue as it was when you were starting out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at your record here. I hadn't picked up on this before, and goodness knows we've talked often enough, but you won 3 times in Australia. This is a Golf Australia production, this podcast, so I wasn't aware that you'd been down there that often and been that successful. I mean, talk to me a little bit about playing in Australia. You had the knack for it.
I liked it down there. The golf was very similar to where I was coming from. I love the people. Who doesn't like it down there?
Yeah.
My gosh. I went down there. Part of my get out of debt tournament was I wasn't on tour yet, and I went down there in the fall of 76, and I finished second to Jack Nicklaus in the Australian Open, mm-hmm. and won $22,000, and that tournament got me out of debt that I had taken for that $10,000. So now Sarah and I were free and clear, and I'll never forget. I hit a driver 1-iron to the last hole that tournament on Sunday late afternoon to make par to finish second by myself. And I was so happy for that because, first of all, I hit a driver 1-iron when it really mattered. Jack won by 3. And I beat the Englishman who shot the great round in the Open Championship earlier that year or the year before. I don't remember his name.
What year was that?
Oh, that was like 75. No, he had a great round at the Masters, 74-5.
Oh, Maurice Bembridge.
Yes. Beat him by a shot for outright second.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Morris, I didn't remember, but it's been a while since then.
Yeah, he's 64 at Augusta was outrageous.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, it got me out of debt. And so I read the next morning in the paper, Jack Nicklaus was quoted, said it was his easiest win ever. And it was so deflating.
Yeah. I only beat this young kid. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he didn't even know my name. But we had a great trip, and I went down there. I went down there every year for 10 or 12 years, and I was playing well. And yeah, okay, you go, you get appearance money, all that stuff. But I enjoyed going as well as Japan because it was it was golf crazy. I played well there, and I enjoyed it very much.
This is your business, but I'll ask you anyway. What were the appearance fees like back then?
When I was playing well and I was going down at the end of the 80s, 50,000 maybe. And I only tell you because people are wondering.
Yeah.
Versus what they get now.
I know, yeah.
They're getting 7 figures, some of them, high 6 figures. We're getting 50,000 or something, 30,000, something like that. But I was the U.S. Open champion, so it was kind of it was top dollar. And Greg Norton was going back there for a whole lot more, and beating up on all their tour. But it was hey, it's the business side of golf that's part of it that everybody doesn't want to say anything about. But it's business. You go down there and you enjoy yourself. You try hard, and I will say this that. There are some that probably didn't try very hard when they got this appearance fee, and some of them missed cuts. I missed one cut in my life with an appearance fee, and I always went at it very hard because I felt like a responsibility to play my very best and give my best because I was getting paid. Yeah,
I've talked to a number of times to Mark O'Meara, your direct contemporaries, and he was the same. He was very successful everywhere. He's got wins on his resume all over the world, and he was very proud of that he's being paid to go, but he performed. They got their money's worth, in other words.
There were some organizers that would give you say they'd offer you 50,000, and if you miss a cut, you get 25. I was good with that, right? Because honestly, you weren't worth anything to them after the cut if you missed it. So it was the agents never liked that. Trust me. Yeah, but I was always good with that because I figured I was going to go over there and play well.
I wanted to talk to you. You mentioned briefly the obviously the U.S. Open, which you won twice, and it's probably what you're best known for, 2 in a row. You and I have talked again many times about the way the U.S. Open has evolved from what it was in your time, which I'm not a huge fan of, the course setup, as you know, to what they've done over the last few years, which is a bit of everything, really, and they seem to be reverting back to what they were before, or head in that direction at least. What's your feeling on that, on US Open course setups, and what it was like back in your day compared with what it's been the last maybe decade?
You know exactly what I feel.
I know. Well, I'm teeing you up here. Come on.
See, you're teeing me up with this softball. Am I supposed to hit this one out of the park?
Yes. I almost gave you a cuddle there in the way into that game.
It wasn't better in my day, but this is the way it was in my day. And back before my day, it was even tougher. Greens weren't quite as hard and fast, especially agronomy. You couldn't do that. But there was plenty of rough, and rough was whereas if you drove it in the rough, you didn't get it to the green. You hacked it out short of the green somewhere. And it wasn't terrible every time. Rough is rough. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you get unlucky. But if you got lucky, therefore you had to go for the green and you didn't know where the bus. So it was all tough. And then we came into this after me. And I think it started around when somewhere around the same time that Rory won at Congressional. Congressional was not very deep rough at all. Now, they blamed it on the hot weather, but come on. Everybody's got an excuse about everything. Yeah. It was they went into the graduated rough, say 6 or 8 steps of semi-rough, and then whatever they call it, and then deep rough way out there. So basically what I contend is that Rory and his colleagues are so much better and stronger and more gifted than we are. The rough should be higher.
Yeah, but I'm not having that argument. I don't think they are. I think that the equipment they use is just better. I don't. Well, I'm not having your generation.
Very nice of you to say, but the equipment allows them to swing as hard as they do now, and so on and so forth. But anyway, they don't have enough rough. They do not play enough rough in the U.S. Open. The argument is they want to have it scurrying around the green where they can't control it. These guys are good. They can control their ball and get it around the green. And then all these runoffs, these guys can pitch it and putt it from the greens as well as anybody in the world. They're the best in the world. Have some rough. And I don't ever don't tell me that it's luck to play at a rough like this around the greens. There's talent there to look at the ball, to judge the lie, to judge the swing, to trust the way the ball's going to come out. There's nothing but talent to play at a rough like that. Certainly there's a little bit of luck in anything you do in this game. But I think the rough should be deep around the greens. I'm not a fan of this runoff at all. Look what happened at Erin Hills. It was like a PGA Tour event. I just wish it would go back to where it was the hardest, toughest test of the year.
Well, you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. The counter argument, what I don't like about what you're talking about, the narrow fairways, thick rough, hard greens, is that if you miss the fairway, you chop it out to, you get at your level, you guys chop it out to 90 yards, and you make a 4 or a 5 every single time. Plus, it eliminates the exciting recovery shot, the risky shot from the rough. It also means it eliminates the range of numbers that you get. You're either getting 4 or 5, or if you give somebody at your level a temptation that they maybe shouldn't take, and they go for it, suddenly 7 and 8 comes into play. What's your counter to that argument?
See, it's always debatable. And that's the way they have gone. It's like to chase it up the green, the way they set up Pinehurst, chase it around those perched up greens. But it's just the fact that they can get it around the green. Their short games are so good. Mm-hmm. And their short games are better than ours because of the clubs. Yeah. Maybe not the talent level, but the clubs have allowed them 60, 62, 64 degree wedges and enables them to do things you and I couldn't do. Yeah. But I contend that even if you had deep rough, you don't get horrific lies every time. So that time you do get that lie, it entices you to go. And therefore you might not be able to. We saw it time and time again at Carnoustie, Vanderveld's Carnoustie, when the rough was so bad, probably the worst rough I've ever seen in my life. And narrowest fairways of all time. In fact, didn't the R&A take more control of setup after that year?
That was the last time the greenkeeper was involved. Yeah, I
read something interesting from a friend of mine just the other day, John, that the USGA used to do the same thing. And it was in 47 or 48 is when the courses the USGA started to take over because they were so differently set up every year and they wanted some continuity on golf course setup, which was tougher.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but as I say, I get a bit bored watching guys grinding. Well,
there's the argument for that, but there's also the argument that, and I talked to Arnold Palmer about this forever. He was a huge advocate of being the toughest test of the year. You should be exhausted Monday morning, and part of that is growing rough. See, the priority to me, number one priority on any golf course is drive, put it in the fairway because it sets up the rest of the hole. And the priority is not there anymore because the rough is not deep enough. You've got to be able to hit whatever you can hit off the tee to put it in the fairway. And that's not a number one priority anymore.
Yeah, I do get the argument that the 4 majors ideally should have 4 very different identities. And the USGA has maybe lost that in the last decade or so.
The U.S., that's part of the argument is that they have lost their identity, and they did. And I think they're going to go. I think they're going back to somewhat the way it used to be, but they still want the players to play. More for your argument. But Mike Davis, who set him up all these years, is retiring. So John Bodenheimer's taken over, which nobody cares. But it's going to be. I think it's going to be a little more of a consistent, tougher test off the tee.
Yeah. So my next question, what made you so good at that form of golf then? What were the strengths of your game that played into that kind of golf?
I don't know. I enjoyed the U.S. Open to start with.
Yeah. You were just as mean. You were just as mean as the U.S. Open. Maybe that's part of it.
Well, you know what? And don't think I was going to say some of that. My mentality to accept it was part of it. And some of that acceptance is that I played decent enough in the U.S. Open early on to appreciate what they were trying to do to everybody. It did eliminate a lot of people on the first tee because they felt like they were defeated already.
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of it is from experience that I played reasonably well early on in the U.S. Open, so I embraced it. I drove it well. I ironed it well. I was a good bunker player, and as long as I made some putts, I could survive it. But I never gave up on a hole, and that's the part of the beauty of the U.S. Open, which you don't like, is that you hit it driving in the rough. You have to mash it out 60 or 70 yards short of the green, and there we're going to see who has the guts to make par more often. Mm-hmm. Okay, don't give up on me. You just yet par, because I can still make par. And when you don't give up, it's amazing how many times you can salvage par when you have to.
Yeah.
Versus a regular tour event or European tour event.
Well, one of those, just what you described. I mean, I actually watched you do this when you got the 4 at the last hole at the country club out of the front bunker. I mean, that's a perfect example of that. I mean, the bunker shot, you touched on this earlier. I mean, the bunker shot for a player at your level, it wasn't that difficult, but the situation was incredibly difficult. Talk me through that a little bit.
Well, you said it right. You said it exactly the terms that I've always used, John, is that the bunker shot itself was fairly simple. The situation made it the most important shot I ever hit in my life. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the best shot I ever hit in my life, but it was the most important shot because therefore it got me in the playoff against Nick. Yeah. It's just I drove it with a 3-wood off the tee. I put it in the short rough on the left, which was mistake number 1. But it looked like it could fly back in the day when we actually hit flyers. And so over the green was dead. If I hit it over the green, I couldn't make par, if you remember the slope of the green. Yeah. So I said, I take 7-iron out and hopefully it flies. If it doesn't fly, I'm in the front bunker where I can make 4 from. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. If it flew, the 7-iron would still stay on the green. So that's exactly what happened. It's a terrible position to be in on the last hole when you're tied, but that's the hand I was dealt. So when I hit it in the bunker, I was just hoping like hell it didn't bury. Yeah. And when it didn't, it was okay, but I still had to execute the shot.
Yeah, I must admit, I lament the demise, if you like, of the flyer. We don't see enough of the flyer anymore because it was actually a useful shot now and again, especially where I grew up. I mean, the course I grew up on, there was a lot of long par 4s that played into the prevailing wind. And a lot of times I was actually trying to drive into the semi so that I could get a jump on the second shot and run the ball onto the green. I mean, so you could use it. It wasn't, you were actually trying to miss the fairway completely.
See, and therefore it lies your admittance of why you never progressed any farther, trying to drive it in the rough.
Well, there's something I can't argue with that. Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, how about that? You drive in the rough and you had that tree in front of you, and if you could make it fly, you could get it over the tree into the green. Yeah. And you can actually make it fly. You weren't sure, but you could scoop enough grass behind the ball when the ball would come out, knuckling and cut through the wind. So, after about 1987 or 8, we never hit another flyer. Very few of them anyway.
Yeah. Which of your 2 US Open wins do you look back on most fondly, or is it a tie?
The first one. Yeah. For a lot of reasons. One is that it was my first, most importantly. Second, it was at the country club, which never disappoints. It was a wonderful place, such history there, as Oak Hill has. It was in a playoff, which was special. It was against the reigning Open champion. A lot of those things came together to make it. But more importantly, it was just the first one. It meant so much. You're never quite sure if you'll ever do it. You kind of know that you have the ability because of your tour record, but you got to be during 4. And I don't know if we put too much pressure on 4 weeks a year or the right amount or whatever, but you have to be right 1 week out of 4 or 4 weeks out of 4. But during those 4 weeks to win a major, you got to be hitting on all cylinders. And then you got to be a little lucky, right place at the right time. And you always have to hit a shot or make a putt come down the stretch. And so there's a lot of different things that have to happen to win. it was a great week. It was a great week.
Yeah. Plus, it must have been nice to kick Nick Faldo's ass. Come on, let's be honest.
I knew that. Why do I know you so well? That was funny. You know what? It didn't make any difference. It didn't make any difference to me. Well, it does. I mean, you want to beat a top player. Yeah. Obviously, it makes it even more special. I got a couple phone calls that night, Sunday night, on telling me, don't be depressed or not excited enough if you show up Monday and there's not that many people out there watching. It's a work day.
Yeah.
You know, so I was all ready for that. You know, one round for your life, the U.S. Open, and showed up there that day, 20 or 25,000 people out there. And I said, wow.
Yeah.
Time to get it done.
Yeah, it was cool. I remember.
Yeah.
And I've got a trivia question for you. I'll be interested to see if you know the answer to this. 3 guys tied for runner-up in your second win. Can you tell me who the 3 were?
Really don't care.
So you don't.
It means nothing to me.
Uh-huh.
You know, it was Mark. It was Ian Woosnam.
Yes.
It was Mark McCumber.
Yep.
And Chip Beck, maybe.
Correct. Yes, I'm impressed. Yeah.
Well, and I only know because Mark McCumber used to, you know, in a good-natured way, every time he saw me for 10 or 12 years after that, he'd always, one shot, you would not have been U.S. Open champion. And it kind of started to annoy me a little bit. I finally said to him in front of people to his face one time, I said, Mark, for Christ's sake, you lost. Get over it. Okay? Yeah. I heard enough of your crap. One of those things. But it was the guy that I was concerned about coming down the end of that Sunday afternoon was Jumbo Ozaki. And it's pertinent right now because of the Masters win 2 weeks ago, last week. But Jumbo was so long and a good driver. And at one time on the backside, he was only one behind me. And I'm thinking, oh, God, if he would happen to drive it in the fairway every hole coming in, he's going to make a birdie or 2. Yeah. So he actually made a bogey or 2 because he didn't drive it well. But he was the guy I was concerned with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to switch opens now and talk about your sporadic play, if I'm going to put it that way, in our open over here. Again, you and I have talked about this before, and I've given you a lot of grief over. Tell me how you got on in the 1985 Open at Royal St George's.
Well, not very well. Of all places, St George's was one that the ball would bounce, not exactly you were expecting it to bounce.
Yeah.
In most cases. Tom Weiskopf said it best to me when we were doing the Open Championship for ESPN. It was like a giant ping pong machine.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. And he's right.
Yeah.
And my dear friend Bill Rogers won there, which, certainly was a highlight of his life. But I don't know. I didn't embrace it for a long time. And that's all on me. That's my fault. I honestly sit here, and if we have regrets in our life, that's one of mine, that I got stubborn about the Open. It was I didn't like. I tell you what I didn't like. I didn't like that it was not an official win.
Yeah,
and it wasn't official money.
Yeah,
and did that. I just felt like if we U.S. players were to come over there, it should count because anyway, that was only my thought. And that was a stubborn, selfish way to think about it. But when I didn't go over there, for a year when I should have, was a mistake on my part. And and I regret it. But I did learn later on to embrace it. And I really thoroughly enjoyed it my last 4 or 5 years over there. In fact, my brother came twice to caddy for me, and I had a couple of decent tournaments, whereas somewhere on the weekend, it could have gone the other way and I could have finished way up there. Yeah. But it never kind of went my way, or I didn't play well enough somewhere on the weekend, or mostly Saturday, to really have a chance. But I was excited waking up once or twice on Saturday to go play. And it was just it wasn't meant to be, but it was good weeks. I really did enjoy it. And then going back and doing TV there for 8 or 10 years at ESPN was brought back a lot of memories, during my play.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned the broadcasting side of your life post playing, there's two things I wanted to get into, and that was what I think I kind of know the answer, but you stopped playing competitively relatively early. I mean, you didn't play much seniors golf. I think people will wonder why, given how competitive you were, but maybe that's the reason why you stopped early. I don't know. You fill me in on that.
I don't know, John. When I didn't win the third Open at Medina, the air went out of my sails. Was it burnout? Was it psychological? Was it, who knows what it was? And I played, years after that, and I just didn't play as well as I would have liked. I was floundering a little bit, but mostly was because I wasn't, fired up to play like I used to be. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to say, some people go through their whole lives like that, but it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And so I played till I was 42 years old and took the TV gig for ABC as the analyst. But I still played a lot after that. But when you go to the booth and when you play tournaments, doing TV and trying to play, you're really no longer a player. Some people tried to warn me that. Arnold tried to warn me of that. I said, I can do it. You're really not a player anymore because your sights are not 100% on just playing and hitting shots and going to bed that night and waking up that morning. And you know what it's like. And so it started to go downhill then. And I played, probably a lot until 46 or 7. Didn't play well. Had a couple of chances, but didn't play well. And still was semi enjoying the game. And then, then I didn't play much my last 2 or 3 years of the regular tour. And I said, ABC and I kind of went our ways. I said, well, hell, I'll go play golf again. I was looking forward to that. And I didn't play well. And I guess part of that was never embracing it as much as I could have. And then I got an opportunity to go back into TV when I was 52 or 3 and jumped at that opportunity. But, I don't regret any of that. It was decisions that weren't made easily. There was a lot of thought and a lot of help from outside, Sarah and my brother and, a little bit my agent and, people that I trusted. So anyway, it was the way it is. And it, it might've cut my golf a little short, but it certainly gave me something to do. I'm sitting here 66, still doing some TV. It gave me something to do at this age. It kept me right in the middle of the game. And part of the reason why I still think about it so much. So in the long haul, it might've been a really good thing.
Yeah. Are you the kind of guy that looks back on your career and remembers the highlights more than the losses? I mean, what sticks in your head the most? And stop laughing.
The losses still hurt.
Yeah.
Honestly. And anybody that's played this game at a certain level, and I don't mean our level, I'm just mean college golf, amateur golf. When you play to win or just play to do the best you can, the losses you will remember. Because what do you learn from? Where do you grow from? Where do you it's from the losses because they hurt. And I think that's when I started to go downhill, is because the poor play and the losses didn't hurt like they did before. Exactly right. And when you can go to bed at night and turn it off after shooting 73 or 4 that day, then something's wrong. And so I do remember, I still feel too self-centered or arrogant to go back to some of the exciting times. I still go to the the 85 Masters or maybe the 84 US Open, and certainly I go back to the 94 US Open where Ernie won. But thank goodness there's not a whole lot of them. There's enough of them to keep you up at night, but thank goodness there's not a whole lot of them.
You mentioned the 85 Masters. I've got to ask you about that because how long has that lingered with you, or does it still? I mean, that was that was hard to watch, Curtis. It must have been even worse for you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you for saying that.
Well, it was. I mean, Jesus. I mean, if you play golf, there is no enjoyment in watching that, really.
It was. Trust me. When you're out there doing it, when you're in the moment, and I hate that phrase, in the moment. When you're out there in the process doing it, and you're not used to playing like this, or you're not used to hitting, you expect a lot out of yourself. And when you don't perform, you feel like you really failed. What am I going to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
And it was the Masters. So you know what? You get up the next morning, you get on an airplane. I went home for a week, and you gotta get on with it. After 3 days off, you start hitting a few balls, getting ready for the next week. And I've said this story a lot. Is the very next week was that I played was the Tournament Champions out in San Diego, and Jack took me aside and said just a few words. He just said, I know this is tough. You can go one or two ways. You can go the good way or the bad way. Yeah. I think you'll learn from this. But just remember, it's we've all done it. Yeah. And it made a great deal that he took the time to say that. I felt like I was going to be okay anyway, but he took the time for a young player, and that meant more than he would ever know. And just that we've all been there. And so, but the 85 Masters was interesting. I should have never been there to start with. After shooting 80 the first round, and then I played very well, and then I had a 4-shot lead with 9 holes to go, and I didn't play that poorly. I just hit it in the water twice. Yeah. And Bernhard Langer won, and congratulations to him. And people don't give him, in my world, the credit that he deserves. He shot 32 on the backside. When he was behind. That's extraordinary. But I still felt like it was mine to lose, win or lose, and I lost. So, and sometimes when you lose, you got to give yourself some credit because you didn't do anything to really lose. Somebody beat you. Mm-hmm. That's easier to take. But when you lose and you lost it, it's harder to take.
I know you talk to your brother every day. What did your brother say to you in the wake of that?
Probably not much. He knew better.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah.
There was not anything to say. Everybody treated it as Watson said when he went to the press room when he was 59 years old. Nobody died here.
Yeah.
Okay. We will come back. We will play golf again. You know what? I didn't think so, but the sun came up the next day.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would ever come up again.
Yeah.
There's just not enough. You just don't say anything. You really don't. You just kind of move on, and I think about it. But the best thing I could ever do is get back into the arena, is go play golf again. Yeah. I didn't play the very next week because I planned on taking off. But the best thing I can do is go get on that golf course and get back in contention. And I did just that. And I believe it was 85. I was playing with Jack in the last round of Canadian Open.
Yeah.
And beat him. So that was huge. To win later that year against top players. Huge for me.
Yeah. I want to switch now to the Ryder Cup, which again has been a big part of your career. I have to say your timing, your generation's timing wasn't the greatest for Americans, looking at it from an American point of view. You came along just about the time that the Europeans suddenly decided to become competitive in the damn thing, because it was a bit of a walkover before, certainly before 83, your first one. You've seen a bit of everything in the Ryder Cup, just as in your tournament career probably. Talk me through the good side of the Ryder Cup and the bad side.
Well, I'm going to tell you what I tell everybody else. It could be a clinic, it could be saying a few words after dinner, it could be a conversation over beers. Everybody says, what changed the Ryder Cup? And I'll give you 5 reasons. Seve, Nick, Sandy, Ian, and Bernhard.
Yeah.
That changed the Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
Nobody else. Well, and I think right now Tony Jackman as well.
Yeah.
Because he could handle those five guys. He could handle Seve. Yeah. But anyway, it's the way it is, and that's the timing of it. And we didn't play well enough. They were immensely motivated because of Seve.
Yeah.
I think Seve's love for the Ryder Cup and the Ryder Cup's ability to prove that we can play on a national scale. And I don't mean any of this in a negative way, but I think I sense this all along is that this is the time for them to prove to beat the big bad USA.
Yeah.
And this is our chance to do it. If you win the Trophy Lancome and you beat a couple American players, that was not on the national stage like this is. International stage, I should say. And and I think our system, with no excuses whatsoever, our system didn't quite pick the best players of that year and a half either.
Yeah.
And I think I can justify that. But anyway, they beat us. My first was 83. We won. And that was when they were on the scene, but we won by a half a point or a point.
Yeah.
And then game on after that.
Yeah.
85, they beat us at the Belfry. 87, we went back to Jack's hometown in Columbus Ohio Memorial. They beat us there. It just went on and on. So, and we won. But, quite frankly, it was just more motivation, maybe. Who knows why? Yeah. I mean, on paper, honestly, when you put it on paper and you see, the wins and the PGA Tour European majors, it's not supposed to be close.
No.
It's not.
No.
But it is. So why do you think that is? Right here, right there.
Well, plus it's 18 holes match play as well, which is,
yes.
At your level, anybody can beat anybody, really. So.
But when you do it all the time, it's more than just
that's true.
Luck of the draw and 18 holes in match play. So it was great. I say all the time that the Ryder Cup is some of the greatest times of my life, win, lose, or draw, which we did in 89. Yeah. Team golf is something I really, really enjoyed. I love college golf and Ryder Cup golf. I love it's a chance to get to know and behind the scenes players that you play against every day that you really don't know very well. And then certainly winning is more fun, but it was always a great week. And to get to know the other side as well. I've created friendships still to this day because of when I played in the European Tour a little bit early on, because when I played against Ryder Cup or Dunhill Cup teams or whatever it might have been over there, it was great friendships.
Everybody's intrigued by Seve. I'm no different. You played against him a number of times. What was that like? And is there any moments that stick with you? Good, bad, indifferent, funny. I'm sure there are a few.
Good, bad, or indifferent.
I mean, he was a force of nature in match play.
Sitting here at my age, looking back on that, and it could be a stroke play event. You had your hands full. Mm-hmm. In every way you can imagine.
Yes, I can imagine. Yes,
and so I think what I admired the most about Seve is that in match play in the Ryder Cup, you knew you had your hands full. I love match play because gamesmanship is part of it. Mm-hmm. How you can get under somebody's skin in a gentlemanly way, in a nicer way. Yeah. But he could do that. And what aggravated me so much is that I knew it was coming, but I allowed him to get under my skin when I knew it was coming. Yeah. That was on me. I should have blown him off and just said, you do your thing, I do my thing. But it bothered me enough to where it affected me. Did it affect me that he beat me? No, but it bothered me. So he thrived on that. Mm-hmm. And I admire the hell out of him that he could play well and thrive on it and be a part of that. If he won, but he was. I've never seen somebody chip and pitch the ball so well in my life. Now, I will say this: I think Tom Watson and Seve were two of the best, and I think Jordan Spieth is added to that that small group right now. I think Jordan Spieth chips in, pitches in as much or more than the two of those did. It's one thing to be a good short game player. It's one thing to be a good pitcher or chipper of the ball. It's the other thing to make shots. We used to say all the time about Tom Watson, he's just lucky. No, when you do it every day, it's more than luck.
Yeah.
That'd be the same thing. It's more than luck. They're aiming at the hole.
Well, if Tiger's going to Tiger went to Seve for advice on the short game. I mean, that tells you something. I mean, Tiger wasn't asking advice from many people on any area of the game.
Seve's hands just fit on the club so well, and even with a drive or a 2-iron. But when he went to pitch it, he had big hands, but they were so soft, weren't they? And he had this cock and hold off, type of technique. And then on the other hand, he could release a club head out of the bunker so well and get it up and down so quickly. So he had all these hand shots, and you don't teach that. You're born with it. Yeah. You're born with this innate ability to have this imagination to hit this shot that nobody else sees. And that's part of his genius. Gosh, I was on the other side of it many times. But I'll tell you, one of the best shots that I've ever seen in golf is that the year he won the Open Championship, but he missed the green. What course was he missed the green left on the last hole?
Lytham.
About 6 steps.
Yeah, the chip.
Lytham. And he had to pitch it on the green over this little bottom with a 9-iron and run it 40 or 50 feet to the hole. Yeah. Last hole, last shot. I think he's got a 1-shot lead, and the ball lipped out.
Yeah.
It's the most. People have no idea what goes through your system and your mind and your touch feel when you have to hit a shot like that, which is nothing but feel. And he pulled it off like a genius. I'll always remember that shot because it was beautiful to watch.
It was beautiful is the word. It was a beautiful thing. And I keep thinking the ball's going to go in every time I see it.
Exactly. But anyway, moving on, Seve was great. And all the rest of them were great players. I mean, it was not Ryder Cup stuff, but they've proven themselves by winning majors, and every one of them won majors, and at one time probably number one in the world. I don't know that for a fact, but it was a nucleus to build around that was better than anything we could put together.
Yeah, I mean, the whole team was built around that. I mean, Jacklin. The downside for Jacklin back then was he had to ride those guys to death. I mean, they all had to play 5 times, so that the bottom half of the team at that point wasn't. Although I do think that the likes of Mark James, Howard Clark, Sam Torrance, Ken Brown, those guys, they were a bit underrated. I mean, they weren't as good as the guys you just mentioned, but they were pretty good players as well.
Well, you say they were underrated. I don't know if I really agree with that. They were underrated maybe on a international scene because they didn't play that much overseas until maybe later on. But, every one of those guys performed when it counted over there.
Yeah.
And that's all I need to know.
Yeah.
Sam made the putt on the last hole to Belfry one year. Mark James was the kind of guy you desperately didn't want to play in match play. You know why? Because he had a lot of heart and guts. All of those guys. I think the world of them.
They didn't really get to play in the American majors back then. It was very difficult for a European golfer to get into the 3 in America. Even when Seve, I always use this as an example, the 1980 Masters that Seve won, he was playing in that Masters because he finished in the top 1 in the Open the year before. The guy who was running up in that Open didn't get to play in the Masters in 1980. So.
No, you're right. It was all about access, and it was very restricted back then. Thank goodness that changed because it's made golf better. World golf the whole lot better.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was the great disappointment for us. I mean, Seve, there was faults on both sides, but Seve and the PGA Tour that they didn't get on was a great loss to golf in general. Whoever's fault it was, and there's probably faults on both sides, I'm sure. So it was our leader was a bit stubborn, and we all know how stubborn Seve could get. So it was, but it was, somebody had to pave the way, and he certainly was that guy. By playing it out in the press, by doing what he thought was right, and sometimes that wasn't looked on in a positive, but it was somebody had to be the first guy, and he was it. Yeah. Before we leave the Ryder Cup, I want to ask you about your captaincy. What sort of an experience was that? I know that I've read this more than once, and I think I've talked to you about it. Is Tom Lehman talking to you yet?
No.
No. It's still the same, is it?
No, yeah. That's all I'll go. The greatest week, other than winning a golf tournament of Sarah and my life. The lead up, just to remind everybody, we were delayed a year because of 9/11. So I had 2.5 years to prepare, and I enjoyed every part of it, from picking out to do this to designing golf bags. Quick story. So we're designing. I told Burton, which was the golf bag company, I said, basically, I want you to design me an American flag, not the American flag, but the most patriotic bag you can envision. And they had their 4 artists back there draw up on these big boards what they depicted that to be. So one night, my brother and my wife and I, we had way too much to drink, and we had putting together the one we thought the best, and we were pasting to put it, kind of make it perfect, and it turned out perfect. It's amazing what alcohol can do to the imagination.
It's a wonderful thing.
So they made, so that kind of stuff was great. And, but the week itself, the guys listened. The guys wanted the parameters of what to do and what not to do. They were all part of this team. It was an eye opener for me. The dinners, the mornings were great fun. Everything about it. They were terrific. I can't say enough of it, and I would not tell you that if it was not that. But the only downside is we didn't win on Sunday.
I'm not sure I fully subscribe to this team spirit thing, in the sense that I know, doing the job that I do, I get to get glimpses behind the scenes a bit. The Europeans do a hell of a job of portraying themselves as this united force and front and all the rest of it, but there's plenty going on in their team room that would be described as negative. Perhaps.
Hey, they had 12 personalities too.
Exactly.
You know what I like to say, John? I had 12 individuals, but I had 14 personalities, and that's as far as that'll go. But you're right. You have to try to. Me as a captain, my job is not to try to mesh these 12 personalities to all come together for one common goal. That's such bullshit.
Yeah.
I all told them, and I agree with you. I told them I get animated about this stuff because I gave 2.5 years. I'm thinking about it. Yeah. I want you to play as an individual. I want you to go out there with your partner, Davis Love tomorrow, Tiger Woods and Davis Love. I want you two to play the best you can play as an individual, and therefore the team will do well. Yeah. Don't try to get into your partner's head, and don't try to tell him what the hell to do. I don't. They don't want to know. Yeah. That was the part of Sevy's captaincy that said drive the guys crazy. But no, you're exactly right. My job was to make them comfortable. Give them a chance to play well. Now, what does that mean? There are 12 individuals with great games. Give them some good dinners. And tell them, go make me look good, boys. What else do you do? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Make sure they have a chocolate bar on the backside on the 15th tee every day. That wasn't me. No. If you need to wipe your nose, there's your towel. That kind of stuff. And I think they appreciated that out of me. I completely agree with you on this team atmosphere. But I will say this: they all do get along well. They all had a good time.
Yeah, as I say, I think it's a bit overrated, and I think the format as well definitely helps, if you can put it that way. The team that on paper isn't as good as the other team, I think the format evens it up a bit for sure.
Well, the match play does that. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You can get motivated, excited for 18 holes, which over 72 holes, your weaknesses are going to show in stroke play.
Yeah, but and the great thing about the Ryder Cup is it's become the greatest show in golf, really. There is nothing better than a Ryder Cup that is close and with the singles underway. I do worry a little bit, actually, in passing, that hasn't happened for a while. It hasn't happened since Medina, and that the way the courses are being set up is almost too much in favour of the home team, and that we're not getting close matches. The last 2 or 3 have been fairly comfortable victories for the home team. And that's a dangerous road to go down. You kind of lose it. It loses its thrilling aspect, if you like.
I don't know if I agree with that because they're all world-class players. There's 24 of the best players in the world. I don't care what golf course they're playing or how it's set up. I think they're all playing the same golf course. I will say this, though. Going over to Europe and always playing a course in which they play the tour on is a definite advantage, that they know the course. We go to courses that we don't know at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so does that really affect you? Maybe just a smidge.
Well, I think my mind goes back to France. I mean, I've said this before, and it made me laugh at the time. I was out watching on the course, and I glanced across, and there, standing in a row, was Jim Furyk, Steve Stricker, Matt Kuchar, and Zach Johnson, all of whom were captains or vice captains. And I'm thinking to myself, on this golf course, those four should all be playing. They would have done a far better job on that golf course, the way it was presented, than certainly Phil Mickelson, who was wholly unsuited to it. I mean, he was spraying it all over the world. So in that respect, I do think that, the course setup does have a role to play. Because it certainly did. It certainly did in France. Yeah,
I just certain courses will benefit certain players, but I still go back to these are 24 world-class players. I don't care if you play the St. Andrews or Oakmont or whatever. They can adjust and they can, everybody's playing the same golf course.
Yeah, and there's always somebody playing poorly. You never get the whole team playing great. Unfortunately, there's always one guy.
Well, that's the nature of the. Unless you pick the week before the 24 players, you're going to get somebody not playing at the top of the game. But that's the beauty of it, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The pairings from the captains, the motivating yourself to go do something that you haven't been doing very well for the last couple of months, all the above. I still think it's the greatest event in golf. It's not a championship. It's certainly a whole hell of a lot more than an exhibition, but it's an event, and it's happening. And it gets the world's attention for 1 week every 2 years.
Yeah. Before we leave the Ryder Cup, one last question: does the 1995 one keep you awake at night still?
Yeah, a little bit. Just because when you're a pick, I think you have a little bit more pressure to justify your existence, and I didn't play that poorly that week. I just, as you know, in partnerships, you can lose. I just didn't play well a week. But then I got motivated in the singles to play Nick, and we were having a really good match, and it looked like I was going to win. And then I kind of, there's a lot of phrases I could use that aren't good for this little video. So. I didn't play well coming down the stretch, and he won, and I felt like I let a lot of people down. In this golf game, when we talked about the Masters a few minutes ago, there was one person that felt bad, and that was me, that I let myself down. In this case, I let down 11 other members, a captain who picked me. It's just, you can go on and on and on.
Yeah, but
I really did something. And I really did something that was uncharacteristic, and I really felt bad about it.
But I always look beyond the results of the matches, Curtis, and look at the numbers on how people actually played. I mean, I had occasion to talk to Peter Townsend, who played in the 1971 Ryder Cup a while ago, and he said he played great in every match and lost every one. But he was playing against Arnold Palmer or Jack Nicklaus or both in 5 of the 6 matches. But he just got beat. And you mentioned Sam Torrance holing the putt in 1985. Well, I've looked at the numbers, and it was a great moment, iconic moment for Sam, and wonderful and all the rest of it. Sam was round in 79 that day.
There you go.
And won his match, and he's a hero.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but his golf was nothing to write home about.
I mean, Nick and I actually, if I remember correctly, played. You never know what he's going to say, but I think we played, if I remember right, pretty well. It was a pretty good match. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's one of those times you wish you had back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to finish off. Last question is the modern game compared with the game as it was when you were at your peak. I mean, I'm old fuddy-duddy enough to. I subscribe to this theory, put it this way, that way back in the day, the equipment, when they started out, wasn't nearly good enough to take on the golf courses. That's why the scoring was so high way back. Then it got to the point where the equipment caught up, and it was a fair fight for a long time, maybe 50 years, and you were part of that. Now, my contention is that the equipment is so good that at your level, that the courses have to be manipulated to try and keep up, and the game is diminished by that. How do you feel about that argument? And I mean, I think that your era was far more fun to watch. It was more interesting. There was more shot making. And again, I know I'm heading down the old fuddy-duddy route here, but that's how I feel about it. I don't think the game at the top level now is as interesting as it was back in the day.
You know, whatever I say, it's going to sound like the old fuddy-duddy.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm the same. I accept that. You know,
I never want to be that, because I admire the hell out of all these young players. I will say this, is that I think they're enormously talented. Okay, they are bigger and stronger. Are they better athletes? I take offense to that, because some of us were pretty good athletes in our day as well. Are they bigger? Yes, and bigger is good now because it enables you to hit the ball farther. But Jack Nicklaus was a hell of an athlete. Why was Jack Nicklaus the best player of all time? Arguably.
Yeah.
I never have asked him that, and I've always wanted to. You know, Mike, he didn't swing the club better than anybody else. He didn't putt the ball better. He was a better athlete. Mm-hmm. He could put the club on the back of the ball consistently because he had great hand-eye coordination. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. And I think the equipment of today doesn't allow these young athletes to let their ability show.
Yeah, I mean, my argument is it's not a knock on the modern players. They're wonderful. They're fantastic. They're at least as talented as your generation, but the game is not as good. That's what the players are as good, but the game isn't.
I think that I'll put it like this: I made a living hitting 4, 5, and 6 irons, and you never see that hit today unless it's into a par 5. Yeah, and I hate to see. Augusta National, which is on everybody's mind last week, I hate to see what they hit into par 5s, because, for instance, 13 and somebody hit 7-iron in there on Saturday, one of the top players. And let's go back there and hit off that side hill, downhill lie, the 4 woods that I used to hit in there, or Seve or Nick, the 2 irons of the 4 woods. Now we're going to see how good you can put that club on the back of the ball. Mm-hmm. That type stuff. Yeah. It's a whole lot easier with a 7-iron. Mm-hmm. And some of these other holes, I mean, 15, and go back in there and try to hit a 3-wood into 15 and stop it on that green. It's impossible. Yeah. Just shots like that. And that's not a knock on the young players, but I just think the equipment and the ball, and I'm old enough now. I'm a huge Titleist guy in that, they've been the best ball forever, and the clubs they make are fantastic. But all the clubs and balls are fantastic. But I'm getting to a point where enough's enough, because I want to see these guys. They hit shots. You know why they hit shots? Drive it so damn crooked most of the time. They have to hit shots from the trees. Yeah. I've never seen people hit it so far offline as I did last week at the Masters. Mm-hmm. And now they're chasing distance, which now they're hitting it farther offline. And I guess that's probably Bryson DeChambeau is more fun to watch than some, because he hits so bloody far offline. Yeah. But it's not good for the game. And they're not playing the game from point A to point B to point C the way the generations before them came.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess I'm saying the same thing, trying to say it a little nicer, softer way.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, you mentioned the 13th hole at Augusta. It's the perfect example, and Fred Ridley even brought that up a couple of years ago in his little press conference during the Masters. That Jones's line on that second shot was that it was a momentous decision to go for it or not. Now that decision is gone. There is no decision. Yeah, they don't make.
Well, they put it up in the trees. They go from the pine straw. They go from whatever and. The decision now, we didn't really have a decision off the tee, because there used to be 3 pines up there. And if you went at the middle pine, that was a good tee shot, because you would bounce a little left, and now you're going to be able to go. If you went at the right pine, you were going to be too far, you lay it up. So now we could never hit it far enough to get up in the pine straw. And now they do. So now the decision for them is how far across the trees they go. which to me is, if they hit a good tee shot, they're hitting a short iron in there. So I don't know. Augusta National is our best example. Excuse me, our best example strictly because it's virtually the same golf course that we played. There's some new tees and
the greens are a bit faster now, are they not?
They certainly were on Thursday, although they were fast some days in our day.
Right.
They were really somewhat out of control. Mm-hmm. But Thursday this past week, they were. They had some lightning speed to them, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I do.
But
that's
wonder. The expense of the golf course now, though.
Well, it is, but that's my argument on the manipulation front. I mean, I do wonder when, a world-class chipper of the ball like Shane Lowry, who's top 5 in that category in the world, chips into a lake. I do think, is this really golf anymore? I do wonder about that.
Yeah, and hole locations that are suspect, like front right at 15, things like that. But you
don't say hole location. Come on.
No, I don't. Flag stick, I try to say. I do. It's just, I agree. I don't know why we did morph into flag stick versus, pin is out. Flag stick is acceptable, or hole, but hole location, come on. How about the patron observation decks?
Oh, man.
Yeah. That rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? But we digress.
Yes, we do. Yes. Yeah. If I put you in charge, Curtis, what would you do about all this?
I don't know if you can do anything because the cat is out of the bag, isn't it? I don't think in society in general, you can never take away what you've already let out of the bag. And I don't know. You could in golf. But you're not doing it in tennis and the rackets, the balls. I will say this: baseball goes to and fro with the ball some, and I don't know about cricket or but I just you could.
But I mean, my argument is always that the golf is the only game where we've messed around with the venues to fit the equipment. Other sports have fixed the equipment to suit the venues. Baseball is one. The javelin is another. Tennis, they've slowed the ball in tennis. It's at Wimbledon because it was just getting ridiculous.
Yeah,
but golf's done the opposite, and I've never really understood why. I don't get it.
That's a good point. I've never really thought of it like that. I don't know. I tell you what I am. I'm totally sick of the talk and the rhetoric. Either do something or get off the pot.
Yeah. Well, my theory is I had my previous guest on this podcast was Martin Slumbers from the R&A. And I put this to him. I mean, my theory is that the RNA and the USGA are right now, they've gone through this incredibly lengthy procedure because ultimately I think they realise that they're going to have to stand up in court and say and argue legitimately that they've tried everything to fix this before it got to court. Because if they don't do that, they're going to get slaughtered in court. That'll be you haven't done you haven't explored every avenue, you haven't consulted with absolutely everybody, but they're going to be able to stand up in court and say that they have, and that's my theory for why it's taken so long.
Well, I think what's going to happen is bifurcation is going to happen.
Yeah.
The country clubber doesn't want to hit the ball any less, and we're only talking about 10,000 players in the world, 5,000 players in the world, the professionals. The gray area does come on college golf, top amateur golf. They want to play the same balls and equipment that we do, and the mini tours, all that around the world. So you're going to have to draw the line somewhere, and wherever you draw that line, you're going to have to roll back the ball or shrink the driver head. The irons don't hit it any farther.
No.
The irons are so good now. The irons are just jacked up. It's just a number on the bottom of the club now.
That's right.
So, make the driver head in 3. Hell, some of these 3 woods go as far as the driver. It's the COG or CO, whatever it is, and coefficient of CORs.
Restitution.
Anyway, you got to, shrink that, shrink the sweet spot on the driver in the 3 wood, and bring the ball back 5% or something. Make the ball spin more. Do something to make them back off. Now, we don't want to see people hit 2 irons off every tee. No. So you bring back the ball 5 or 7%. Jack says 10%. That's ridiculous when you start running the numbers. But you're always going to have big hitters. We've always had big hitters in the game.
They should always have an advantage. It's just my argument is that the advantage is now out of stock with it just doesn't fit the game anymore.
Yeah, and we don't have enough rough. We don't have enough penalties. So if you don't drive it in the fairway, I'm on ESPN last week at the Masters, and I came on TV one time and said, I'm going to sound like an old dinosaur now. Yeah. And if I do, bear with me. The hole is set up by driving it in the fairway. Your angles to these greens, in particular Augusta National, are set up in the fairway. If you do miss the fairway, there's not a lot of rough, but your margin of error shrinks a great deal because the firmness and speed of the green, much like a U.S. Open or Open Championship because of the tough hole occasions. Yeah. So therefore, let's put it in the fairway. But these guys don't buy into that.
No,
it's all about distance. It's all about distance. Mm-hmm. And the numbers by these really geeky guys are proving them correct. The closer you can get to the green, the better you can score. Yeah. I don't buy into that. I'd rather hit an 8-iron in the middle of the fairway than a pitching wedge from the heavy rough. But I don't know. That's the way they play. And let's just bring it back maybe a little bit. And I don't understand why Titleist and TaylorMade and Srixon and all the other manufacturers can't say, okay, we're going to give you this. We're going to give you this. Mm-hmm. I don't think it hurts their sales at all.
No.
Guys, the country club's still going to buy Titleist and the balls they want to play.
I agree with you. I've said that to Titleist. I had a big, long chat with Wally Uline a few years ago on that. But they're scared of the unknown. That's their issue.
Yeah, but people are still going to have to buy golf balls.
Yeah.
And they're still going to buy the brand that they're loyal to. So you still let them play the golf ball of modern day, and you bring back the pros. The problem is, where do you draw that line? College players, amateur players who are going to turn pro, they want to prepare by the tour and play that golf. I don't know. You can put a hard line in the sand, if you're a professional. What about this one? This is a good argument. What about the amateur that qualifies for a PGA Tour event, and he's got to switch golf balls? Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? You just got to suck it up and switch golf balls. That's what it is.
I mean, you just play by the rules of each tournament. I mean, my counter argument to that would just be, well, going in what kind of tournament this is going to be, whether it's modern ball or old ball or whatever ball, or clubs or whatever, anything. Going in. Yeah,
maybe that's it. Yeah. But getting back to our original point, does it fix what's going on now, which is basically overpowering every golf course we play? I don't know.
Well, I do worry that, and I ask this question rhetorically to a lot of people, where are they going to play in 10 years' time if this continues?
Well, they're going to play the same places. They're just going to pitch and putt to every green.
Well, exactly.
They might as well take the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 iron out of the bag.
Yeah, and that diminishes the product. And that's exactly what I don't get. I don't understand the officials' reluctance to do something about this because the product isn't as good, or it isn't going to be as good. In my
There you go. Well, you know what? And bottom line is that we're all after the same long-term goal here, is to keep this game healthy, the game that you and I grew up with, the one that we still think about laying in bed at night. You write about it, I talk about it now. We're just trying to keep it healthy and continue to grow. Growing is another subject altogether, but to continue it to be played and loved around the world the way it is today or was yesterday. That's what we're all trying to achieve here.
Curtis, that seems like a brilliant place to stop. I know I've kept you on here for just about an hour and a half, and I thank you for your time. It's as you well know, I think already, one of the great joys is talking to people like you about golf. It's been brilliant. Thanks for your time.
Well, we get, and I appreciate you having me on, because we get to know each other over the years, and the relationships with players and media and all the above. And it's all one big happy family most times. And I appreciate that as well.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you, John.
And that wraps up episode 41 of The Thing About Golf. And if you enjoyed that chat with Curtis Strange half as much as I did, then you enjoyed it an awful lot. A big thanks to both John Huggan and Curtis Strange for their time and effort there. Now, I hope you've made the effort to subscribe to the show, because on our next episode, we're going to meet a truly unique figure in the golf world. Andrea Watson is the General Manager at Yarra Yarra Golf Club, the only female General Manager of a Sandbelt golf facility. And that gives her, as you'd expect, a very different perspective.
Golf's gone through a radical change because of COVID. That's without a doubt. But looking at why it's gone through that radical change is really important. And I think that's something that the golf industry is not really addressing.
That's one of the game's most interesting administrators. Next time on The Thing About Golf.